Hi, my name is Genesis, and if you watched episode 1 of Extreme Home Makeover Rookies Edition, then basically you know I'm the shit. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
She was in fact not kidding and did think she was the shit.
No, but if you haven't seen the first episode of Extreme Home Makeover Rookies Edition, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, how about I give you a quick little recap? Yeah?
Now, just a quick recap. Let's rewind the tape. So in January 2022, tenants made their escape. 2 apartments left a mess with chaos in the air. Needed someone handy to show them some care. Enter me, GTC. Struck a deal with my old man, feeling fancy. 10 grand in my hand, spent it all on the first place. But hey, we're only human, we've all made mistakes. Loved it so much, oh yeah, it's true. Invested 4 months, man, they flew. Apartment number 2, we're ready to dive. Let's make some magic and bring this space alive. Didn't start till July came around, cause I had to hit a pause. My mental health was on the ground. But now that I was back with tools in tow, I'm gonna show you how I turn this place from 0 to hero.
All caught up? Good. Great. Now, in this episode, I'm going to talk about how I completely remodeled the second apartment in my parents' 3-unit building. We had left off at the end of the first episode in April of 2022, and I had just finished the first apartment, and after I finished that apartment, I took a very well-deserved break. I did some traveling, I recharged my batteries, because as I had mentioned in that video, I was extremely burnt out. I mean, I was crisp. Fast forward to July of 2022, I had recharged my batteries and I was ready to jump back into this project. Now, as I had also mentioned in the first video, I started to view these apartments as my babies. And for anyone who has siblings, you know that the first child rarely gets the same treatment as the second child. Whereas my main objective for the first apartment was essentially perfection. I wanted everything to be pristine. For the second apartment, I wanted to reach that same level of excellence without completely losing my mind. And so based on that, I knew that I needed to take a different approach to the apartment. And that's how I came up with the idea of doing a themed apartment. Now, for those of you who know me, you know 3 things to be true. 1, I travel a lot. 2, I'm basically a sunflower. I chase the sun and I wilt when it's away. And 3, choosing just one color.
So I love colors. I love color palettes. Colors are very exciting to me. When I see colors together, rainbow, like just colors all together in one place, I get very, very excited. Very creative juices.
Impossible. I genuinely love all colors. So, with that in mind, that's how I came up with the idea of the themed apartment from sunrise to sunset. Essentially, the idea was that every room in that apartment was going to be a different color. And the reason it was going to be a different color was because it was supposed to mimic the different times of day. So I did some study on color theory and I found out that different colors have different effects on your mood. And I thought that was so fascinating. And because in my mind, I still wanted these apartments to be Airbnbs, I thought what a great way to create an apartment that is kind of like a getaway. 1, a getaway to nature, sunrise to sunset. And 2, for the person to go to the room whose color best fit the mood that they were in. So all of this was true with the exception of 2 rooms, the kitchen and the bathroom. While I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do with those rooms, I did know that for the kitchen, I wanted it to have a Mediterranean style. And the reason behind this was because one, I love the Mediterranean style. I feel like it's just so beautiful. And 2, at that point, I already knew that I was moving to Spain in September of 2023. So I was Spain vibes, I was Mediterranean vibes, I was Europe vibes all the way. And now that you are officially all caught up, I invite you all to open a bottle of wine, grab a cold one, make yourself some popcorn, kick back, and enjoy episode 2 of Extreme Home Makeover Rookies Edition.
Let me start by telling you something unique about my parents' 3-unit building. Unlike some apartment complexes, none of the apartments in this building have the same layout, which personally I think is pretty neat because it caters to different tastes and needs. Now, you may recall from my first video that I was working with an apartment that had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a living room, and a kitchen. But in this apartment, because as I had mentioned, it had a different setup, there was only 1 bedroom, a bigger kitchen, a bathroom, a hallway, and a huge living room. Here's a close-up of each room before I started. This is a bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, the hallway, and the living room. Now, let's talk about the living room. As you can see in this picture, it didn't really have a roof, or at least not a functional one. Because of some roofing issues and just the fact that this is an older house, there was a lot of water leakage problem. While I could have just covered up most of those issues with a fresh coat of paint, it was really important for me that if I was going to invest in this apartment, that I actually fix the problems as opposed to just coating over them. My dad did hire someone to take care of the roofing issues, and then with the help of the same guy who assisted me in the first apartment, he installed a new drywall to create a brand new ceiling, which you can see in this picture. Whereas in the first apartment, I went from room to room, remodeling each space individually. Because in this apartment, there was more of an open flow and fewer doors separating the room, I found that working on several rooms at the same time was a better approach, especially when it came to installing the floors and painting all the white trim. It was just easier to keep going once I started. Once I got those 2 big tasks out of the way, I was finally ready to start painting the walls. The sunrise room. I wanted the bedroom to represent the sunrise because even though it's a place where you also go to sleep, as I mentioned earlier, I'm more of a sun chaser. So I thought, why not create a room where I'd personally love to wake up in? I started off by drawing a sketch of what I had in mind. Now, mind you, I'm not much of an artist, let alone a muralist, so the idea of painting a sunrise mural was pretty daunting. But as you should know by now, I'm pretty delusional. A sunrise is made up of so many colors, so after I sketched out my ideas, I needed to choose the right shades of reds, yellows, and oranges to really capture that sunrise feel. I went back and forth and even played around with some tape to see if I wanted to include the actual sun in the mural. But once I realized that would be too complex, I decided to stick to my original sketch of just the mountains. With the sketch done and the paint bought, I was finally ready to start painting. Despite not having experience being a muralist,
I had a lot of fun painting this room. It did take me approximately 2 months to complete, but the reason it took me so long to finish this room was because, as I had mentioned, I was simultaneously working on other parts of the apartment while also painting this room. Now, I learned a couple of things while doing this mural. The first one is that if you ever decide to do a mural and need to draw an outline, do not, I repeat, do not use marker, especially blue marker, because it's very hard to paint over. And I spent a lot of time, especially in the last layer, trying to paint over that blue marker. The second thing I recommend is doing your prep work. And for me, that meant covering the floor more than what I actually did. Even though I wasn't worried that paint got on the floor because it was easy to wash off, I definitely would have saved myself so much time and backbreaking work had I covered the floor more from the beginning instead of being lazy. But you live and you learn, and I promised myself not to make those same mistakes again. La cocina. The next room I tackled was the kitchen. Just like the living room, I had to strip away some of the wall due to water damage. I decided to keep the top shelves and install new cabinets at the bottom, just like I had done with my last apartment. But this kitchen was different. It was my experiment baby. I wanted to try something new, something I had seen in Tuscan homes, something with a Mediterranean vibe. So I decided to try out a faux Tuscan wall technique. Basically, it's a process where you mix paint with a special glaze to create a unique texture that gives off that old-timey feel. It's a simple process, truly, but it requires a lot of patience, which, let's be real, has never been my strong suit. I actually had to redo one wall 4 times because I kept rushing. And here's the thing, when you rush, you compromise quality. And that's just not worth it. For the kitchen floor, I chose a vinyl tile that also had a Tuscan design. The floor was different from the rest of the apartment because I wanted to give the kitchen its own identity. I went with the same countertops as my last place, but this time, instead of painting the cabinets a sage color, I went with a simple gray because honestly, gray goes really well with yellow. Now, I was really into the ceramic tile aesthetic I saw during a trip to Spain. You know those beautiful patterned tiles? But ceramic tiles can be very expensive. So I decided to cheat the look a bit. First, I had a panel installed that looked like it was made out of ceramic squares. And then I found a custom design website where you can make square stickers that were the same size as the tiles on the panel. This made the kitchen look like it had that ceramic tile vibe without breaking the bank. And the cool thing was that the design I chose for the sticker was the same design as the one on the vinyl flooring, but in the color blue. Since this kitchen is bigger than the other apartment, I added a table where people could eat at. And just to keep everything cohesive, I found some chairs and spray painted them the same blue as the ceramic tile stickers because you guys know me and you know I love those little details. At this point in the process, it was now April of 2023. And for those of you who might be wondering, well, if she started the bedroom in July of 2022 and then transitioned to the kitchen in October of 2022, then how is it that she finished the kitchen in April of 2023? What happened between October and April? And in order to answer that question, I need to share the following. However, before I do share what I'm going to share, I do just want to say that I did go back and forth a lot as to whether I should include this segment in the video at all. Just because it does address a little bit more of a serious topic than, you know, the lightheartedness with which I like to approach my videos. But because we live in the age of social media, I think that it's our responsibility to kind of approach social media in an intelligent way. And what I mean is, you know, I find that with social media, we often share what's good and our accomplishments and all these wonderful things, which is nice. And I think it's necessary to have a platform where you could share the good things that happen in your life. But the downside of social media is that sometimes, because we're just sharing the good and the great, we kind of hide from sharing the messy and the not so good, which is kind of, like I said, you know, there's always like the choice to simply not share one's life on a platform, which I think is very valid and I completely respect. I am personally, you know, someone that does like to make videos like these and does like to share her projects with, you know, the world. And so when I do so, I try to do so in a way, you know, when I share aspects of my life, I want to do so in a way that's kind of like on my terms. And to me, that means sharing all sides of a story, the good and the bad. So even though this might seem a bit random that I'm including the following, I'm doing so because, like I said, I want to make sure that the whole story is being told. I feel like it would be doing a disservice to just the experience as a whole, not including the segment. And so, yeah, with that with that whole spiel, and without, you know, I don't know if you've figured it out by now, but there were many reasons as to why I started this project in the first place. But I think perhaps the main reason I embarked on this journey was because around the time that this project, you know, I came to me and I started thinking about it, I was really struggling with my mental health. And I had reached a point where I just couldn't deal with it on my own any longer. And so I had the courage, which I'm still to this day amazed and just curious as to where so much courage came from. But I had the courage to reach out for help. And the reason I say courage is because growing up, I was kind of thrown into this role of hyper-independency. And for those of you who know exactly what I'm talking about, as a hyper-independent person, the most torturous thing to do is ask for help, which is so ridiculous because I honestly, in retrospect, don't think it's weak to ask for help at all. And I actually think to this day, it was one of the greatest acts of self-love that I could have ever done for myself. And so around October of 2021, I decided to embark on the journey of searching for a therapist. And as many Americans know, unfortunately, the healthcare system in America is not the best, especially when it comes to mental health services. And so for those of you not familiar with how the system works, essentially when you go, you know, start looking for a therapist, they make you do a psychological evaluation. It's the first step. And when I went to go do my evaluation, I was essentially told that I would be put on a wait list and that it would take approximately 8 months until I was connected with a therapist. And just to put that into a bit of perspective, I want you to imagine like you break your arm and, you know, being told like, oh my gosh, like that really sucks, but we'll take care of it in 8 months. Yeah, it was incredibly frustrating. And while I did, you know, I was told about out-of-pocket services, when I kind of started doing some research on that, I found out that out-of-pocket services, although instant, are incredibly expensive, 1. And 2, because this was all sort of new to me, there was still a lot of shame surrounding it, you know. Thank God it's not so much the case now, but back in that moment, you know, there was still this very stupid stigma that, you know, anyone who needed therapy was, the only people who went to therapy were crazy people, which is absolutely not true. And thank God, like I said, we've kind of moved away from that narrative. But yeah, at that time, you know, nobody in my family had really ever gone to therapy, and none, at least the people in my close circle, they also didn't have a lot of experience with therapy. So I felt really isolated and like a kind of like a black sheep. Like, who do I talk to about these things that are happening in this experience? And so I didn't prioritize it, and I decided to wait until I was connected with the therapist instead of doing the out-of-pocket services. And so that's kind of, like I said, that's when I knew I needed to take on a project to kind of redirect my thoughts and distract me from the spiraling and everything that was going on. And yeah, I took on this project, and I just want to say that it really did wonders. Like it really did help me, distract me, and it served as a wonderful band-aid. I think the brain is so incredible when you intentionally and actively try to redirect your thoughts and rewire your brain. The brain, you guys need to understand, like, the brain is one of the most incredible things, and the power that it has, both good and bad. But the focus is to, you know, try to focus on a path that will help you. And so, like I said, this project served as a fantastic band-aid. But we all know, band-aids don't cure wounds. You know, like, even though it served as a distraction, I still had a lot of things I needed to deal with and unpack, that my body just at the age of basically 24 decided it was time to purge itself from. And so fast forward to May of 2022, and I still hadn't been connected with a therapist, but this time it was mostly my fault, because in March, I had been reached out to that there was somebody who might be able to help me out. And I, riding the high of the project and still thinking that, like, once I was done with this project, all my problems were going to be solved, I didn't pursue that. And then in May of 2022, when I finished the first apartment, and that kind of feeling of like, oh my God, like, my problems are still there, that's when I decided to prioritize a little bit more my mental health, and I decided to do those out-of-pocket services. And shout out to BetterHelp. Even though I still think online therapy is very expensive, they did at that moment offer a discount and instant help, so that's awesome. But yeah, so I started going to therapy, and I started going to the sessions, and that's why I was able to kind of bounce back. And so in July of 2022, I started the second apartment. But I then committed a mistake that perhaps a lot of people who have just started therapy make, which is, I started to feel good, and I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And so I thought I was healed. I was like, I was genuinely gonna, like, one day just like make this post about, like, oh my God, like, I graduated therapy, like, all my problems are solved, like, which unfortunately is not the case. That is not how it works. And so I didn't know that at that time, and so I stopped going to the sessions. I was feeling good. I started working on the apartment again, and then October hit. And I believe most of you know I'm from Chicago, and so while Chicago will always hold a very dear place in my heart, because I love my city, there's also the downside to Chicago, which is that during the winter it's brutal. And I don't just mean the freezing temperatures, I'm talking about the fact that the sun doesn't last a long time. Like, the sun sets very early. And so that's kind of when I started to notice that I might have something that a lot of people in climates similar to Chicago have, which is something called seasonal affective disorder, which in the most basic terms essentially means that you don't function when there's no sunlight, and which I feel like who can really, like I feel like we're just little plants that need water and sun, and so during those winter months, the person becomes very sluggish, they don't want to get out of bed, they become like very depressed, and so there was like that. And then the fact that I was working at the restaurant, the fact that I, had issues in my personal life and just like everyday struggles that a person deals with. And then the apartment. And so I was overworked. I couldn't handle it anymore. I was being pulled in every direction. And I just wanted to scream because I wasn't allowing myself to get rest. And so I just became mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted. Like it's horrible. Like I just was not functioning as a human. And so those months were very tough for me. And so I think in trying to fulfill all my responsibilities, I kind of pushed the apartment to the back burner. And so very little progress was made during that time. But of course, like after every thunderstorm, there's always a rainbow. When March hit, which, spring started to come, and I was finally reached out to again, being told that there was a therapist who was ready to take me on. And, that wasn't out of pocket. And so you guys can imagine my excitement. I immediately jumped to the opportunity. And then when I started going to therapy, I realized me and my therapist just didn't jive, which then you can imagine my disappointment, because after waiting 1.5 years to be connected with somebody and then to not connect with that person. And the reason I share this is because, if you don't have experience with how therapy works, or if you have gone to therapy and have had a bad experience with a therapist, I would really hate for that to be the reason you stop trying to go to therapy. Because when they say that therapy is like dating, it is so true. It took me a couple, really like 1 or 2, until I met my current therapist, whom I absolutely love and have so much appreciation for, because she has helped me in ways that I don't know if she'll ever understand how much she's helped me. But yeah, please don't let that be the reason you stop trying to go to therapy. But yeah, so even though we didn't jive, I think it was just the knowledge of being active about trying to get better that kind of helped me get through that period. And just as I, started jumping back into the project, I got double pink eye. And now you're probably wondering, well, why the hell is she telling us about double pink eye? Well, the reason I'm sharing that is because I was so disappointed with not having got a lot of work done, and because I just wasn't the best at at that moment giving myself grace. I just was rushing, and I wasn't taking care of myself in the sense of wearing protective gear. And I work with a lot of dust and a lot of chemicals, and so obviously, of course I would get double pink eye. Like my body reached a limit, and so I was in such denial that I had double pink eye that even when I had actual pus coming out of my eyes, I was like, no, it's not happening. And because I knew that it meant that I would have to take a break. And so thank God I have such a wonderful group of friends who, when they saw me, they were like, you need to go to the hospital. And so they forced me, they essentially drove me to the hospital. And I think that was the moment that that something just clicked in my brain. I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, there should be nothing more important than my well-being. whether that be, you know, and that's for anybody, whether that be a relationship or whether that be a project or anything, nothing should come before your health. Let me repeat that. Nothing should come before your health. Because let me just tell you, if you don't prioritize your well-being, your body will make sure that it takes time for you to take care of it. And so, that for me was just a big shift. And when I share this story with people, you know, oftentimes I'm met with like a lot of admiration and like, you're such an inspiration. And I mean, like, I'm just a girl. Like, of course I love to hear that. Like, of course I love to be praised and told how wonderful I am. But it's a little bit hard for me to take that praise when I feel like there was, without sharing at least the other side to it, and in the sense that there were hardships in this project. There were many times I wanted to throw in the towel and, you know, quit. There were many times I had a breakdown, and thank God I have such understanding parents who, you know, had to live, unfortunately, the struggle with me, but who were there to support me. But it was, you know, there is that hard side to it. So it's not always fun to reach your goals and to accomplish your dreams. It's not always just an easy path. Like, no, there are obstacles you have to overcome. And so if I could leave you with 2 cents, it's that for me, this project was such a school. It taught me so much more beyond just remodeling and construction. It showed me the best and the worst of myself, because even, like, you know, there were the obstacles, there were also the moments where I felt a lot of joy and I felt a lot of pride and sense of accomplishment. And so if you ever have a project, I just want to say, work on it and work on it relentlessly, and because a little progress, just like any progress made, you know, whether it be small or large, it still counts and it still gets you towards the finish line. But also, never get so attached to something or to anything where your risk is then where your health is then put at risk. And I guess the moral of the story is, as my dad has always said to my sister and I growing up, balance. And with my pink eye cured and everything kind of starting to shift in a good way, I was still going to therapy. This time I didn't quit, you know, even though things start to get good. And I had the realization, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm almost done with this project. Like, I only have 3 rooms left. And so I told myself, girl, you're gonna enjoy every last second there is of this project, which leads me to
the hallway, aka peak of day. With the bedroom being reds and oranges, the kitchen being yellow, the next color in line was green. This room took me only about a week to complete, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had gained a lot of experience drawing mountains from the bedroom, and also the fact that instead of using marker, I chose chalk to do the initial sketch, which meant I didn't need to spend years covering it up. And with the hallway done, the next room was the bathroom. The first thing I wanted to do was update the shower. The original wall panels were just plain white and didn't go all the way to the ceiling. They made the bathroom feel cheap. So I went online and found these amazing white brick styled panels. I thought about adding a design like I did with the kitchen backsplash, but once they were installed, I loved the clean white look. After that, I gave the tub a fresh coat of special paint. It was a bit tricky with all the curves, but I think the end result was worth it. As for the wall, because I wanted to create this cohesiveness throughout the apartment, I decided to use the same faux Tuscan wall technique that I had used in the kitchen, but this time I wanted to do it in blue. And as for the floor, and in theme with the kitchen, I chose a vinyl tile with the same design as the kitchen backsplash. After painting the walls, hanging a new mirror, and installing a new sink, the bathroom was complete, which meant The only room left was the sunset room. Remembering the headaches from the earlier rooms, I made sure to cover the entire area with paper before I started painting. For this room, I chose a palette of pinks and purples to represent the sunset. Once the room was prepped, I started sketching the mountains. This time around, the sketches came easy. I felt more confident and the vision was clear in my mind. I went layer by layer, sketching the mountains. In retrospect, I do wish I had made the mountains layer a little bit more like I did with the sunrise room, but I still think it turned out pretty nice. Once I was done with the sketching, I went in with tape and started taping the edges of the mountain. The reason I did this was so that when I painted each layer, none of the paint from that layer would seep into the next one. The process itself is actually pretty easy. It's just very repetitive, and so you need to have a lot of that patience that I've been talking about throughout the episode. And so this time around, luckily I did have that patience because I told myself to kind of take it like therapy, and it really did feel like that. It was very therapeutic watching, going from layer to layer, taping it and then removing the tape once I was done. And it was pretty neat watching how the mural was coming together layer by layer. The rhythm at which I was working at felt very natural, and within 10 days, the mural was complete. I was thrilled with how it turned out. Although I decided that I wouldn't be furnishing this apartment like I did with the first, since I'd be renting it out instead of listing it on Airbnb and therefore wouldn't really need to furnish it anyway, there were still some minor details I needed to work on before saying I was done. Those minor details included things such as installing a new lock system, shaving the doors down a bit because of the heat and rain from the summer, they had expanded and wouldn't shut, and custom sizing the blinds because they were a specific measure that couldn't be found in stores. And with all that done, the apartment was finally ready. From sunrise to sunset. My biggest hope is that you take away this. A dream shouldn't stop being a dream just because it seems crazy. In fact, it's those crazy dreams, the ones you never thought were possible, the ones that force you to face your fears and put to test your weaknesses, that are oftentimes the most exciting and rewarding to pursue. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I cannot wait to share whatever project comes next. But until then, keep dreaming, keep creating, and remember, anything is possible.